Welcome everyone. Today's workshop is supposed to be on the idea of luxury in the 18th century. So our first task is to consider what is the definition of luxury. And so I've got a modern example here of what some of the words that we associate with luxury. I'd like to just quickly write down what you associate with luxury and what do you regard is not a luxury in modern times. Okay, so taking us back to the 18th century, we'll see how luxury is one of the big themes of the historiography and this idea about how the 18th century is characterized by luxury goods, consumerism, the idea of taste, and the idea of desire. So we've made our list of what we think is a luxury and what we think is an essential. And it's pretty much the same in the 18th century, with the rise of consumerism, the rise of a very wealthy middle class who've got more money in their pockets to spend. And as we'll see, fashion and taste is determined by those at the top, by the monarchy, the aristocracy, our princes rather than our paupers. But the idea is that the taste is copied and filters down along the social scale. So, key themes of the historiography of consumption. So, fashion is a big item in the 18th century. What do people wear? And as we've seen already, even though this is the idea of Britishness and Britain making itself as a nation, we've still got one eye on France, and Paris still sets the season for fashion. All women's fashion looks towards Paris, and what you get also in the newspapers is reports about what lady so and so is wearing. So there's a huge sort of interest in what fashion is and who are the trendsetters. Consumerism is also a big theme in the historiography of consumption. What are people buying? And then this leads to debates about luxury, which we'll come across in a bit, and the rise of what we now call capitalism. And Hogarth, in the picture there, satirises a lot of these themes in his paintings about um, rich people who are socially aspirants, the middle classes who are trying to buy their way into the aristocracy, and the hypocrisies and kind of double dealing that goes with that. So, what creates the 18th century emphasis on commerce? Well, the historians have put forward several factors that they see as distinctive to the 18th century. One is the fact that we've got a predominance of the Whig Party in politics. And the Whigs, even though they're still aristocracy, they do have merchants and manufacturers as part of their supporters as well, and their political ideology is a bit more favourable to commerce and trade than the Tories. And with the rise of what John Brewer calls a fiscal military state in 1688, the Whigs really pushed the idea that Britain is a commercial trading nation. Part of that idea of the commercial trading nation is empire, that we're also an imperial nation. And so we see a huge influx of imperial goods, the sorts of things that we were thinking about when we looked at food, also apply to material items, to produce, to skilled artisan type items that are coming from China. There's obviously all the different foodstuffs that are coming from India and the West Indies. So empire really enriches the range of choice that people have of items to buy and produce to buy. We also have what Peter Borsay has called the urban renaissance in his work on the rise of the town as the main feature of 18th century Britain. And he particularly looks at places like Bath, which are the pleasure grounds of the aristocracy and the middle classes, places where the rich would go to have a good time for the season. And these places created a new type of urban culture with the new Palladian streets and squares and lots of leisure facilities like theatres, assembly rooms, ballrooms. And together, this forms what he called the urban renaissance. So, an emphasis on living the life, the city life, and having pleasure. And what comes with pleasure? Luxury. So the theatre is a luxury item. We see the rise of big shopping streets with new types of shop that have shop front displays, big windows. Before the 18th century, you didn't really get shops with big plate glass windows showing off their wares. Now it becomes fashionable to promenade along the streets of Bath or London and look at the items in the shop for display. And there's consumer desire, obviously, in that. A fourth factor is developing communications and industrialisation. It becomes a lot easier to get luxury goods around the country. So luxury goods aren't just confined to London, which is still the main market for these sorts of items, but also can be transported across the country much more easily once you've got better road system and then canals and towards the very end of our period railways. And industrialisation, I'll talk about Wedgwood in a minute, but it becomes a lot easier to produce luxury goods. So access to these sorts of items becomes much more accessible, so lower down the social scale because things become cheaper once you mass produce them. Finally, the Enlightenment is seen as a contributory factor to this consumer society, that people are thinking in new ways about what luxury and particularly the economy is in this new fiscal military state. So, key book that changed historians' perceptions of the 18th century was this book, The Birth of the Consumer Society, by McKendrick, Brewer, and Plum. And they argued that